I didn't want. It's my fair.
Okay, Kelim P8 M Mishnah Aleph.
I put it right exactly.
So a tanur chatzatzu ben nesarim. So if you have we know we're talking about tanurs, ovens, different sizes. Tanur, there's kubach, there's kira, right? So what happens if somebody takes a tanur and he puts a wall in there and he splits it into two? So chatzatzu ben nesarim. So if you take an oven and you split it up with wood boards, maybe urias or with curtains, right? So nimtza. So now the question is it looked at two ovens or one oven? So nimtza sheretz from Malcolm Epod. So now if you did this and you put wood in there, so if you find the sheretz in one spot, I call tame, everything is tame. Meaning even though it's sectioned off, it's still going to be tame. Meaning, even though they put into two sections, it's not permanent enough. But kaveres puso pekuto bekash. So here, if you took a basket that had a hole in it and you stuffed up the basket with straw, and then you stuck the basket with the hole, with the straw plugging the hole, you stuck it into the avir of the tano. So asheretz besayfa. So if there's a sheretz inside the basket, a tanur tame, then the tanur is tame. Even though it's in a basket and there's straw and etc., right? Because everything, I think the pshat is everything is temporary. A sheretz, but that's if the sheretz is in the basket that's in the top of the tanur. A sheretz betanur, but if the sheretz is in the oven, the achron shebasayfa tameya, the food that are inside the basket are tame the same way. Rabbi Eliezer says that it's Torah. Right? Meaning he holds that the basket does act as a barrier between. Yeah, Rabbi Eliezer says if it's a mitzila b'meis chomer, so saying if the basket saves you from a mace, Thomas mace that's chomer, right? Meaning in Mishnayos Oilus it says that if you have a broken basket that plugs up the hole of you have a oil, right? You have a mace under there, right? And you had a mace is inside the basket and that basket's inside the house, right? So since in that situation, the Mishnah there says that it blocks the tumah. So if it blocks the tumah for tumah of tumas mace, which is smaller, like satzel b'kli cheres hakal, is it not going to save us from kli cheres that's mekel? So they said back to him, if it saves by mace chomer, shekain chalkan oilim. The reason why it saves it is because you can divide by a mace. You can divide the tents into different. You have a tent. So you can make a front room in the tent and a back room in the tent, a living room in the tent, right? So therefore, the kaveres is like a mechitza, and it saves you. So tatza b'kli cheres hakal she'ein cholkem kli cheres. We don't split a kli cheres, meaning basically the Chachamim said back to Rabbi Eliezer, it's not going to. You can't compare mace to oil. Yeah, I'm sorry, you can't be mace of oil. You can't compare it to a basket and a kli cheres, because by oil we know that there's such a thing as separating rooms in your oil, right? But by kli cheres you don't have such a thing. The mashal for that is hospitals. So if you keep all the doors closed, to the morgue or whatever it is, and Kaihanim could be there. Right? So that's yeah. Fine. Should we do one more Mishnah? Let's do Mishnah Beis also, it's pretty short. Haisa Shlema. So if the basket that was in the oven, that was hanging on the top of the oven, and it was a complete basket. See, the previous Mishnah we're talking about a basket that had a hole in it. Now we're talking about a basket that is complete. V'chein hakupa, and the same thing if you have a box. V'chein hachemes. A chemes is a flask. I think we're going to have that in the daf either tonight or tomorrow night. Hasheretz b'soicha. if the sheretz is inside a Tana tar, the Tana is tar, because these are all complete, so they make a hefsek between the flea and the Tana. A sheretz bataner, if the sheretz is in the Tana, achlin shabasayfa tahirin. Then the food that's inside these that are inside these kelim are tar, the same thing. Nikavu. But let's say they got a hole. So asi la'achlin, if the basket is meant to hold food, so shiura b'zeisim. So the shear of the hole, and there's the shear of a zayis. Also lamashkin, if it's meant to, whatever this box or flask was meant for liquid, so shear b'mashkin, so the shear is b'mashkins. Also lakachu lakach, if it's meant for both, matilan oise lechumra, then we put it, the more chumra one, the kindness mashka, it's talking about where you if it's going to allow liquid to go in the hole, which is a little bit, we said this, and I forget which Mishnah, we said this a little bit, that that there's a difference between water dripping out of the kli and water getting in. The hole has to be bigger. And if you have a utensil that has a hole in it with liquid in the utensil, a tiny hole and the liquid will leak out. But if you want to have, let's say you have a utensil and there's no liquid in it, but you put it down in a puddle and you want the liquid to go into the kli, that is going to need a much larger hole. All right. All right. So that's what it's saying. So again, this mission is saying, well, the previous mission, we didn't say that one over. The previous mission is talking about that you cannot make separations in ovens or any kli cheres. And even if you do make a separation, if there's tuma on one side, there's going to be tuma on the other side. All right. But by mace, and then we had a machlokes whether you can compare it to mace or not. The second mission is talking about, oh no, I'm sorry, there you're talking about where you take a basket with a hole in it and you put it in the top. All right, so then with a hole, if it has a hole in it, it's considered, even if it's stuffed up with straw, it's considered like it's part of the Tana. Right? But the second Mishnah Beis, is talking about anything that's complete and it's stuck in a Tana, then it totally separates the Tana unless it gets a hole. If it gets a hole and the box is meant for foods, and it has to be the size of a zayas. If the box is meant for liquid, then it has to be the size of enough for liquid to come out. And let's say it's used for both, then we're going to go lechumra, and the hole has to be big enough for liquid to come in, which we said is a little bit larger than a hole that goes out. Okay, we'll stop there. I guess we haven't learned Musar a whole week, so we won't ruin the record.